Greetings, everybody. My name is David. It's lovely to bring you all to my bubble, and I hope you've all recovered from your Easter celebrations last long weekend. What an amazing moment to celebrate together, ourselves alone and as a church. I myself was grateful indeed to be able to join in with some of the services that the diocese has been putting on. Hopefully you were able to join in on some of those too, and maybe even find some hot cross buns, some Easter eggs or other Easter treats. And no doubt you had a great deal of self-control and moderating your intake of those treats. Today I get to share with you a sermon from a seat, not quite a sofa, but it will do. And before we do that, let us read our gospel reading, which comes from John chapter 20, verses 19 to 31. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This is the gospel of Christ. So we've just spent a week or so celebrating that Jesus is King of this world. Jesus has risen and death has been conquered. Here in New Zealand, we can celebrate that freely. You would even have found all sorts of different Easter services that you could have watched publicly accessed, even on free-to-air TV. But when we look at the gospel reading this morning, we find after hearing the news that Jesus had risen from his tomb, the disciples didn't go out and celebrate like we have. They took a very different approach. Mary Magdalene told the disciples the news that the tomb was empty. Two of the disciples go to the tomb and bear witness that it's empty. Mary then tells the disciples that she herself has seen Jesus and he is alive and kicking. Cue celebrations, right? No, there aren't any celebrations. There's no big baking effort that begins to make loads of hot cross buns. There's no big Easter egg hunt for the local kids. What do the disciples do? They go into lockdown. They gather in a room and they lock the door. They gather into their own bubble and they enter into lockdown. Why on earth do they go into lockdown? No one wants to be in lockdown, right? We might not like it, but it makes sense for us to be in lockdown at the moment. We're trying to beat a disease that does its most deadliest work on those most vulnerable in our communities. But why weren't the disciples out celebrating? Why on earth were they in lockdown? I think it's important for us to remember that only a few days before this, The disciples had seen Jesus murdered. Their friend, their teacher, their mate, their rabbi, their pal, their leader, their Lord. They had just seen Jesus brutally beaten up, publicly stripped naked, publicly humiliated and shamed, and they saw nails hammered through his hands and feet, and then they saw Jesus terrifyingly murdered by being hung up on a cross. This is all done at the demand of the religious leaders. So not only were they still dealing with the shock of what they'd witnessed, they were terrified and afraid that the religious leaders might be out for their blood too. Hardly a time to go out celebrating when you are fearful for your own life. So I think for good reason the disciples were in lockdown, keeping their heads low, hoping for things to settle down, and they would have been terrified. Are you sure the door's locked? Who knows that we're here? Can they be trusted? Maybe it's not safe here anymore. Maybe we need to find somewhere else. I'm worried about my family. What if the religious leaders go after them? Fear, worry, stress, uncertainty, suspicion, anxiety, rumour, accusations, depression. That locked room would have been a dark and difficult room to be in. Then all of a sudden, Jesus turns up right there in the middle of that locked room. He bursts right into their bubble, right into that room that was filled with fear. And the first thing that Jesus does is he says, "Peace be with you." The very first thing the risen Jesus does with his disciples is he offers them peace. He comes into that space of fear and worry and stress, and he offers peace. That peace breaks through into the disciples, and they become overjoyed to see him. How the feeling in that room would have changed. What a moment that would have been. Did that mean the disciples then were free from their fear and worries and stress and concern about their lives and what the religious leaders might do? No, it didn't. We read that a week later, the disciples were back in that room and the door was locked. But again, Jesus breaks into that space, and again, the first thing he does is offer them his peace. Right now, we're all in lockdown. We're all in our own bubbles. And I'm sure for many of us, there may be fear, worry, stress, uncertainty, suspicion, anxiety, depression. If so, then I encourage you to invite Jesus into your space and for him to bring you his peace. And that's not a one-time offer. Jesus wants to come into whatever space our lives are in and bring his peace again and again, week after week. I think that is one of the joys of gathering together as a church each week, the chance to allow Jesus to come into whatever space our lives are in and bring his peace week after week. And each of us has the chance to be like Jesus and bring his peace into the lives of others. During this time of lockdown, I've been truly grateful for the many phone conversations I've been able to have with so many different people. It's been wonderful to ring someone or be called, and it's like you've broken into that person's bubble for a moment, and you chat and you share, and there are moments where it seems that peace just takes over. Let us invite Jesus into our spaces again and again and allow him to bring his peace. And let us be like Jesus and bring his peace into the lives of others. I really miss seeing you all at St. Augustine's each Sunday. One of the things I miss the most, apart from the morning teas, It's the opportunity to hold the hand of each of you and share in that peace that Jesus, our King, offers to us. I long to have that chance to be with you all again sometime soon and to offer you his peace. I pray that that may happen very soon. Peace be with you all.